I presume because he believed David's story about the lion and the bear, and for that to have happened, God had to be with him. So all those real soldiers slunk away, didn't they? Slunk away. They didn't want to be a part of even meeting him. They shuddered every time he came out. And he did it for a week or several days or some period of time. Goliath would show up each morning and intimidate him. All right, well, in Psalm 11, the Lord is in his holy temple. In the Lord I take refuge. How can you say to my soul, flee like a bird to your mountain? Evidently, some of his friends were suggesting it was time to get out of Dodge because of the difficulty he had. And it seems to me that David is saying here, why should the righteous have to flee? We're not in the wrong. I haven't done anything wrong. What's my sin? Why do I need to leave? And God is my refuge. But David did have to flee for his life, didn't he? Even though he had great faith in God. He did put his trust in God, but he did have to flee in order to get out of Saul's reach. For behold, the wicked bend the bow. They have fitted their arrow to the string. In other words, they're ready to take me out, to shoot in the dark at the upright in heart. If the fountains are destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes see, his eyelids test the children of man. The Lord tests the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. Let him rain coals on the wicked, fire and sulfur, and a scorching wind shall be the portion of their cup. For the Lord is righteous. He loves righteous deeds. The upright shall behold his face. One of the striking things to me about David's Psalms is he is not reluctant to ask God to take care of his enemies. I don't know, do you, when you're confronted with a situation in life, someone or something that you consider an enemy, how do you communicate with God, or what do you ask God about in those situations? When you, being a person of faith, and in a lot of faith and trust in God, and when things don't go, you're faced with situations you can't solve. What kind of approach do you make to God? Art?
Well, he encourages us to say, vengeance is mine, so let him take care of it. He can do a lot better job of it than I can.
Yeah. We can pray for a change in the attitude or the approach of the enemy, can't we? But
he says defeat them and give them drink.
yeah. Heap coals on their head. Rodney?
He also knew that God was going to take care of the situation,
Yeah.
because he had the opportunity to kill him in the cave. He had another opportunity when they were all sleeping, and he or one of his men went into the camp and stuck their sword, and then he yells them there, why weren't you watching the king? So he had all these opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
He restrained his men from saying, well, God's put him into our hands. He says, no. He knew God didn't work that way, but he knew in time God was going to take care of it in his own way.
Yeah. Well, that was just his faith and trust, wasn't it, in God? But he had to make some decisions that it seems to me that showed he didn't understand or didn't know exactly how things were going to work out. And in that, what we face in the uncertain situations we may face in life, we don't know how to. So what are we going to do in the situation if we don't know what the outcome is going to be for us physically in this life? We know what the ultimate outcome is if we remain faithful and true to God. If we maintain our faith and trust in Him, we know all things will work together for good in those situations. But I think Rodney makes a good point in that David evidently had so much faith and trust in God, regardless of what he faced in life, physically, it was going to be okay eventually. In his case, it was okay physically too, as well. So what can we do? Anything different than what David did when he was faced with, confronted with the situations that he was in? I mean, the odds were all against him, weren't they? You got the king against you. You got his troops against you. And you know how certain Saul, or how committed Saul was to killing David. You remember that in the one of the, I think it's the 21st chapter of 1 Samuel, or the 22nd, I don't remember which. But you remember when David went to Ahimelech, the priest, asking if he had any food and if he had any armor or anything, and he gave him Goliath's sword, and also gave him some of the bread that he had. Doeg, who was the chief of Saul's herdsmen, overheard the conversation between Ahimelech the priest and David. And of course he told Saul about it. You remember what Saul did as a result of that, learning of that? He called for the priest of Nod, of which Ahimelech and there must have been 84 others, came into his presence, and Saul was so determined to get to David, he actually killed 85 priests because of his, that was how determined he was. And here David was, a young man at that time, out there being sought by Saul to put him to death. So he faced a serious situation in life. And for him to still express his faith and put his faith and trust in God is, I think, such a great example for us to follow. Psalm 15. Who shall dwell on your holy hill? O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does what is right and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue and does no evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest and does not take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. So who, as David raises the question, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell in your holy hill? Who does? Pardon?
Those who do what is right.
Those who do what is right. Okay? That's what David concluded anyway. All right?
Another thing that I've noticed in his readings, could be I missed it, but he's asking God for help and protection. But I don't sense any fear in any of these things. And I think that's where maybe myself and David are different, is that I get fearful sometimes. And apparently David had so much confidence in God, even though he was pleading for God's protection, he doesn't seem to express fear that it's not going to turn out well.
Yeah. That deep trust and confidence he had in God, I think, is evident, in his life. David really seems to be asking or raising the question, shall it be those who are ungodly that dwell in your tent? And I think it gets back to the issues he was facing, the trial he was facing, because he didn't feel he'd done anything wrong in regard to Saul, and that he still was committed to the Lord and trusting in him. and yet he had all these problems coming up in his life. How do we feel when we think we're living right and doing right, and things don't go too well in our lives? It's a little easy sometimes to wonder, isn't it, about what's going on, or if we've prayed fervently about a situation in our lives or a situation that we know of that we're trying to help resolve, and it just doesn't get resolved. You ever wonder why, Rick?
I'm just impressed with David's, vernacular way of speaking, where he came up with these words to write down.
Yeah,
I'm sure they weren't just,
altogether his.
well, that, I'm sure
Yeah,
everyone at that time was not speaking this way.
yeah.
This is David's unique way of,
Well, he had that special relationship with God. I don't know how much the only case that I recall where we know that God instructed David was through the prophet Samuel. I don't know of any other indication in Scripture where there was that God communicated directly with him. He may have. Rodney?
Look at all these verses. These are all things against other people. And it
Right.
starts with 3. Slander, no evil to his neighbor.
Right.
Doesn't take reproach. Despises an evil person. Swears to his own hurt. Doesn't put out his money in interest. Doesn't take bribes against the innocent. These are all ways in which we treat people.
Right. All right, well, let's look, we've got a few minutes left in class. Psalm 31. These enemies of David had all conspired together to destroy him. He felt that their evil net had been spread for him. His name was reproached not only among his enemies, but among his neighbors as well. Why should it be? Fully convinced that the Lord is righteous, David turned to his faith or trust in the Lord. And in many of his psalms, he uses that phrase, "O Lord, in you do I put my trust." And Psalm 31. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Rescue me speedily. How often do we pray for immediate relief when we're in a situation that is not what we want? Be a rock of refuge for me, a strong fortress to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you lead me and guide me. You take me out of the net they have hidden for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hand I commit my spirit. That's a familiar phrase, isn't it? You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. I hate those who pay regard to worthless idols, but I trust in the Lord. I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love, because you have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul, and you have not delivered me into the hand of the enemy. You have set my feet in a broad place. How reassuring is it to us in all of the time, but especially when we are undergoing difficulty or special trials in our life, how encouraging or how beneficial is it to know that God knows and our Savior knows what's going on in our lives. He's aware. He knows. He's also indicated that he won't let us be tempted above what we can stand, right? So we can endure whatever we're facing in life if we keep our trust and faith in him. Though we may not see the answer, but as David says here, He says, you have not delivered me into the hand of the enemy. So he had been protected thus far. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief, my soul and my body also. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away. Don't you feel the drain on David and his spirit with what he's has faced in life? My strength fails. My bones waste away. My life is spent with sorrow. My years with sighing. My eyes wasted from grief. I assume from tears and so on. Because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have been forgotten like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel. For I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine on your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. O Lord, let me not be put to shame, for I call upon you. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them go silently to Sheol. Let the lying lips be mute, which speak insolently against the righteous, in pride and contempt. Oh, how abundant is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, and worked for those who take refuge in you, in the sight of the children of mankind. In the cover of your presence you hide them from the plots of men. You store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. Blessed be the Lord, for he has wonderfully shown his steadfast love to me when I was in a besieged city. I had said in my alarm, I am cut off from your sight. But you heard the voice of my plea for mercy when I cried to you for help. Love the Lord, all you his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but abundantly repays the one who acts in pride. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. I wanted to ask you in the remaining few minutes we have about this. I thought about it as I was thinking about David. There's many things in his life that raises a question in my mind, but in chapter 22 of 1 Samuel, David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And notice this, and everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him. And he became commander over them, and there were with him about 400 men. He had quite a cast of characters out there with him while he was being hunted, right? All those who were in debt, all those who were bitter in soul. That was his army. He was out there, that band of folks that were with him. What do you think about, I guess when you're in a situation like that and you're running or fleeing from your life, you take whatever help you can get, huh? You associate with whoever you can to complete your escape. In addition to the trust and confidence he had in God, he used these folks that gathered around him who weren't the best of characters. What do you make of that?
He says everybody else was fleeing from him.
Yeah, well, that's true. Even his acquaintances, when they were afraid of him, yeah. So he didn't have much he didn't have many to draw from, did he? If he was going to have anyone to help him in this period of time when he was running or fleeing for his life. So what lessons, any other thoughts or any lessons you think of we can learn, benefit in our daily life? Art?
I sometimes wonder when adversity happens to me that I'm supposed to learn a lesson from this. And so I pray, let me learn the lesson now so you don't have to repeat this.
Yeah, let's do this one time, and let's hope I'm a fast learner so I can pick up on what's causing this. Yeah, that's pretty good, Rodney.
The word cry or crying is mentioned 138 times in the book of Psalms.
You say crying?
Cry or crying.
Crying, okay. How many times?
38 times. That tells you a lot.
Yeah.
What he went through, you know.
Yeah,
And a lot of them, most of those Psalms were written by David.
yeah.
What he says is his couch is drenched, it's soaked from
Right.
crying all night. I mean, wow.
Yeah. Well, when you stop to consider these, what he was faced with at that young age of life, some of us are old enough that we have trouble remembering back when we were 20. Art?
And also, it talks about his friends fleeing, brother. I guess if you're looking at a guy that's having all this trouble, I don't want to be associated with him.
Yeah, well, that's true, yeah. Well, who wants to connect up with somebody that's, well, and I don't know how much they knew, the people in general. I guess all they knew was what they had heard by word of mouth about Saul and his approach. And, of course, Saul had instructed those that were his messengers, whoever those were, he had instructed them that they were to kill David. In fact, he sent them to the house of his house where his daughter and David were abiding to kill him the next morning. And so I'm sure word like that would get around to a degree anyway. And even among his acquaintances, he indicated it was a problem.
And even today, if we make an enemy of somebody who's powerful,
Yeah.
like the head of the mafia or something, nobody wants to hang around with me because they could get involved in this.
Well, it's kind of like one of the public officials in Washington mentioned one time, don't get cross with the FBI. They've got many ways of getting back at you or whatever. All right. Any other lessons you want to share about that? Any other experiences you've had in life that gives you the strength to hold on and stay the course? God's made some promises, great promises to us, and about us being able to successfully get through this life if we stay with him. And so to me, David is a great example of one who was faced with very serious physical problems, and I think part of it was trying to understand why these things were happening to him in his life based on what he knew of how he trusted the Lord and how he had faith in him. All right, if any of you didn't get a mic, did everybody that needed a assignment for next week get one?
Next one, I got it. One extra.
One extra, okay, good.
Pretty good time. Found out pretty good.
Well, I got another one or two just in case I found. All right, if you have time this week, read and we'll talk next week and look at some of those Psalms that I've shared there with you. Appreciate you being here tonight and all your comments.